Hey guys, welcome to my next top 10, and yeah, I'm finally doing another one of these. The last one I did, the Pokemon one, is probably my most popular video. So hopefully, this one is also pretty good. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. This is my top 10 things I would do for the next Zelda game on the Wii U. Now, I've actually planned some other top 10s before, but they kind of fell through. I didn't feel like there was enough stuff. But this one, if anything, there might be too much stuff. Hopefully I can, cut it down. Hopefully I don't have to cut it down. So let's see what happens. So this is my top 10 things I would do for The Legend of Zelda on the Wii U. Number 10, use Miiverse. This one's not that big, but it would still be a nice touch. Now, one of my favorite things about New Super Mario Bros. U is Miiverse, which really makes it feel like you're undertaking the same adventure as millions of other people. You can leave tips for levels, make funny jokes, draw pictures, and sympathize with the people having trouble on the same level that you are. Now, how would something like this work in Zelda? We already know that Wind Waker HD will implement this feature with the Tingle Bottle, but we don't know quite exactly how. Maybe we do, but at least I don't. That doesn't mean, though, that the system in the new Zelda has to be a clone of the one used in Wind Waker HD. In a game like Zelda, I think it would be a bit distracting for it to work the same way it does in Mario U. So the best thing I can come up with for the system is to take the place of the Sheikah Stone that was in Ocarina of Time 3D in Skyward Sword. One little center could be a post office for tips sent by players, sorted by category. Something like that. There's probably some potential in this that I'm not thinking of. I just think Miiverse is a pretty cool feature. It doesn't necessarily have to be almost forced on you the way it is in Mario U. This isn't that important, which is why it's only number 10. They could probably do something cool with it, though, so it's on here. Number 9. Utilize the Wii U's full capabilities graphic-wise. Okay, first things first. This is kind of a given, but since nothing has been confirmed yet, I want to add on to this by saying that this game must be in 3D environments. It doesn't really need to be a separate entry, first of all because I hope that's a given, and second of all because I think they do need to do that to show off the full graphical capabilities of the Wii U. So that's that. 3D game, just like the other console games. Now, we all know what happened back in the early 2000s, with Nintendo showing a teaser trailer for the most realistic-looking Zelda yet for the GameCube, which excited many, and many people felt cheated with the announcement of Wind Waker. While I love the art style of Wind Waker, I also crave the realistic look of Twilight Princess in HD. Both styles looked amazing in HD, the realistic style in the E3 2011 tech demo, and the cel-shaded style in Wind Waker HD. I love the way that looks. But I would still really like to see a full game made in the style of the tech demo. E.g., Aonuma, the leader of the Zelda department and the current face of the franchise, referenced the events in the early 2000s about Wind Waker and all that, and he almost seemed to hint at it happened again. He was pretty much just reminded everyone that the tech demo was not automatically going to be what Zelda Wii U is going to look like. Heck, we could even see a new kind of style. So, just as long as we feel like this game could only have looked as good as it did on Wii U, that it wasn't selling itself short. Graphics aren't everything, obviously, but I would be lying if I wasn't hoping for that tech demo to be the building block of the next Zelda. So let's just see what happens. Number 8. Put in a world or dungeon that hasn't been seen before. Now, I know there's a limited amount of elemental themes for worlds and dungeons. The same ones have been repeated several times throughout the Zelda series. None of these areas have felt like clones of previous areas. And even in a game like Twilight Princess, which literally took place in the same world as Ocarina of Time, it all felt different enough. But what about something brand new? I have to hand it to Skyward Sword for doing this with the Lanayru mining facility. And the Sky Keep also felt new. Repeated themes are okay as long as they're new puzzles. And each Zelda game has done that, but something really new can really stand out, just like the mining facility did. The funny thing is, I don't actually really have an idea for this. I think at this point it's kind of impossible not to use some elements from past games. I mean, even the Lanayru mining facility had elements of a sand dungeon, and of course the Sky Keep didn't really bring anything new in terms of elemental theme. But if we keep that in mind, we can start to get some new ideas and bring combinations never seen before. We'd seen water and shadow dungeons, but never together the way they were in the Ancient Cistern, so do more stuff like that. Now, as far as worlds outside of dungeons go, it's hard and maybe even impossible to create something new, unless you were just going to have a city with skyscrapers and vehicles, and I don't think anyone really wants that in Zelda. But, maybe just an expansion of ideas that haven't really been expanded upon yet. For example, we've seen graveyards before, but how about a really big area with the dark theme of a graveyard? Something like that. I mean, I know it kind of Canyon kind of did it, but more dark. Just some ideas I'm throwing out there. So number 7. Some kind of multiplayer that includes online play. The Wii U can never be as good as a multiplayer console as its predecessor because Nintendo's decision to only use one gamepad with the console. Now, apparently it actually works with 2 gamepads, but no games support that yet. Now, Zelda wouldn't exactly be an ideal choice for the first, but maybe if multiple gamepad play is matured by then, like with Mario Party or something, maybe. Of course, the Wii Remote gamepad could work great for a co-op, and they've even hinted at this, Zelda doing away with the idea that you have to play by yourself. Now, while I want to see a multiplayer option, the key word here is option. Don't force a CPU to play. Please, I really don't think they'll make that mistake, but just reiterating that. At least if you do, be able to switch between the two, like in Simpsons game. It's the only example I could think of. And if they make it switchable and not CPU controlled, like in Pikmin 3, that would be okay. I mean, heck, they've already done that in Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks, so it wouldn't be all that new, unless it was a constant thing the entire game. However, I'd rather be co-op more of an option, and not a forced thing for puzzles and combat. And when I think about it, Zelda Battle Quest on Nintendo Land has puzzles and modes for 2 people, and still allows you to play fine with 1. But anyway, I'm talking more about mini-games here for the multiplayer. Just think Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, or even something like they did in Pikmin 2, like with, the multiplayer mode in that game, create separate levels. Now, I really want online for this too. With New Super Mario Bros. U, Nintendo Land, unfortunately the Wii U still isn't quite the console that's going to have online multiplayer for every game, which is disappointing. There's still those games that are just seem to be taboo to put online, New Super Mario Bros. Being the main one. But, we've seen online play in Zelda multiplayer before. It was in Phantom Hourglass, though there was no excuse for Spirit Tracks not to have it. Maybe it just wasn't that popular on Phantom Hourglass, but I'd like to see it. Now, Aonuma said that Princess Zelda might be playable, but let's wait for more information first, as this game is still very early in development. Not including this wouldn't destroy the game, but including a multiplayer, online and offline, would be a fantastic touch. Number 6, the personal touches. Now, if I was making a Zelda game, there would be a lot of small personal touches, mostly items that I really liked in other games that I would want to bring back, so I've just decided to clump this all into one. So I was really disappointed that the spinner didn't return in Skyward Sword, but now I'm just as much hoping that the awesome time shift stones will make a return, as well as still holding on to the hope that the magic meter and magic attacks can make a comeback. I mean, it looks like they're already making their comeback in A Link Between Worlds, so how about returning, becoming a staple in the series again? Of course, I would also want to see a lot of new items. With the exception of the beetle, I wasn't too crazy about the items in Skyward Sword. The whip, the gust bellows, the magma mitts didn't seem to be very prominent outside of the dungeons they were used in. Neither really did the spinner and the Dominion Rod, but at least those were really cool and made you remember each time you used them. Now, some people will differ about the Dominion Rod, but you get to control a giant statue and hammer things. Come on. So, either quantity or make it so every item gets as much use as the beetle. Either one of those. That's fine. So, those are kind of the personal touches I would like to make, with items-wise. Bring back the beetle, bring back the time shift stone, bring back the whip, or not the whip, the spinner. Jeez. Well, if you bring back the whip, make it better. Okay, number 5. Make a massive overworld traversable by foot. This kind of also leans toward a personal touch, but I think a lot of people would like this. I love it when the overworld in a Zelda game feels huge. Twilight Princess, massive overworld. Loved it. Wind Waker, maybe the biggest overworld ever. But since you were just sailing from island to island, and sailing wasn't all that interesting, at least not to me, it was just used as a means to travel, it didn't feel that big. Let's refer once again to Skyward Sword. I know I'm doing this a lot, but because it was the most recent Zelda game, I kind of have to. Now, Skyward Sword's world, if you put all the little parts together, then it probably exceeds the area of, say, Ocarina of Time. But it feels smaller because it's not all connected. So when I say traversable by foot, that doesn't mean there can't be some kind of transportation system. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Epona, though that would be my first choice. I just don't want the overworld to be separated from the gameplay areas. The whole vehicle, highway, and exit-like system is fine. It's just that we've kind of seen this done many times now with Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks. And Spirit Tracks is actually a bit different, and I liked it. It didn't feel as bland, and Skyward Sword, which felt a little more bland in the sky. And I've said this, if they could have just connected the three major areas, it would have felt a lot more wide open in Skyward Sword. And the flying world could have just been like a warp system, and would have been completely different. It would have been okay to be bland. But even the areas themselves could have felt more wide open. Lake Floria, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But I think you kind of get the point of what I'm saying. Huge overworld, at least make it feel huge, and I'm not discouraging making travel easier. So Epona is fine, warp system is great. I just want to feel like I'm in a huge overworld instead of a level select screen. And by the way, Nintendo, if you actually do make the overworld a level select screen, look, it was fine in Mario Galaxy 2, since it was still kind of a hub. It was barely tolerable in Sticker Star. But if this isn't Zelda, I will give the loudest scream ever. Now, I want you to repeat this after me, Nintendo. The third dungeon in the game will not be named World 3-6. Number 4. Use the gamepad effectively. Nintendo Land was a great example of all the different capabilities and the potential of the gamepad, and I have to say, the games I've played and seen since don't really seem to live up to that. Mario U is pretty much an identical experience without it. I like boost mode, but it's really more of a side feature, and there's not that much to it. Pikmin 3 looks promising, but Mario 3D World, Tropical Freeze, Super Smash Bros., and Mario Kart 8, have we even heard of any way that those games would use the gamepad? Wind Waker HD? Yeah, we get to see an overhead map on the gamepad. That's been around since the DS. For a remake, it's tolerable. But these new games being developed exclusively for the Wii U, I want to actually see really innovative control. Now let's get a little less broad and just talk about Zelda. What can we do? What are some ideas? We've already seen the teaser trailer, and honestly, being able to switch your item at any time with one tap like that does sound very useful. Hell, are they even doing that for Wind Waker HD? I think if they were, I would have heard about it. Why not? Okay, let's make sure we at least do that for the new one. Now, what else? I think the best thing to do would be to have tabs on the top of the gamepad, like, just been playing this game, Animal Crossing. Now, we have our map tab, our items tab, and what about something like the bow and the Hawkeye from Twilight Princess, being able to scope an enemy? That would work. Maybe a limited overhead map, and you could tap on an enemy to hit them with a bomb or an arrow or something. Maybe some new item that we've never seen before that would work best with the gamepad, or bring the beetle back, yeah. Bring the beetle back. Use the gamepad as a remote control and a first-person window. It would actually work a lot better. Have a variation of the beetle with new capabilities. It's like you're looking out of a pilot window. That would be great. It's a bit hard to think of ideas, but the possibilities are very exciting. Now, later on this list, there's going to be one entry that's going to take everything I just talked about and put it in a different perspective. But we'll get to that once we see it. For now, I'm just thinking of ways the gamepad can be used at maximum potential. Now, another idea I have is, how about having an instrument in Spirit Tracks on, like in Spirit Tracks on the gamepad, like a piano? Now, yeah, I mean they did do it in Spirit Tracks, so it wouldn't be that original. It would still be cool though, make it different, like a piano, like the little iPad thing. I don't know. Now, on the subject of Spirit Tracks, the last thing we need to talk about is the gamepad's microphone. I don't really want to see it used as prominently as it was in Spirit Tracks, but does it have to be abandoned entirely? Not really. I mean, for something simple like Whistling Grass and Twilight Princess, it could be used, but I really think they should focus on getting the gamepad to its fullest in all other areas before thinking about the mic. Number 3. Lots of dungeons. Personal interest? Maybe, but it is my list, and come on, who doesn't love dungeons in the Zelda series? I've gotten really complex in some of these list entries, but for this one, I'm going to keep it simple. Just put in a lot of dungeons. That doesn't mean rush them, but set the bar really high, so if they don't quite meet their goal, we still have a dungeon-packed game. Going back to Skyward Sword, they actually had to add a couple of them at the end of game's development, and that kind of caused a delay. So set the bar higher. How high? I know it sounds crazy, but what about 15? Why not? Envision a really good sized game like Twilight Princess and create more than you need. And you can afford if not every dungeon of the 15 created is ideal for a full-size dungeon. And then what you can do is implement some of those ideas into smaller mini-dungeons, or put them in the dungeons that are already there and make them even better. And while Skyward Sword 7 is a pretty good number, I want more. Onoma kind of hinted at there not being a set order for the dungeons, and while I would fear that could take away the use of the items you get from the dungeons, I don't really care about that much. Just put in lots of dungeons, and I'll put it to you this way. You can have your level select map if it means there are a record amount of dungeons. I would not mind playing through World 14-6. No, okay, seriously, no level select map. I'm just putting my priorities straight here. Number 2. Make the gimmick enhance the gameplay. Okay, so Zelda has a set and time-tested formula, but we can't really imagine what the next game will be like because we don't know what the gimmick will be. So we can be pretty sure that the game will have one. Why? Because almost every other Zelda game has. The only games I can think of that didn't really have a gimmick were the first one and Link's Awakening, which was the first handheld game. But every other game has had some kind of gimmick that makes it stand out. Wind Waker had the sailing, Twilight Princess had the wolf, Ocarina of Time had time traveling, that sort of thing, just in case you don't really know what a gimmick is. So, yeah. So every game has had a gimmick. It makes it stand out. Now, here's the thing. The word gimmick can be linked to negativity, sometimes in an exclusive way, like, oh, gimmicks are bad. But that's not always the case. Gimmicks can be good or bad, and in Zelda, in a general sense, gimmicks are a good thing, as they make each game feel different. I'm not going to say what I think the gimmick should be. I don't really have an idea of what it should be, and since I don't think 20 dungeons counts as one, I'll just say make it enhance the gameplay. Make it make the game better, more fun to play. Don't just put it there just to be there. By far, the best use of a gimmick to enhance the game, at least in my opinion, Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask kind of had two, the time system and the transforming masks, and they both really enhanced the game. They made it an amazing game, made it a fan favorite. Without those, Majora's Mask would have kind of felt like an inferior clone of Ocarina of Time. Because of this, the transforming ability would be the only gimmick I would be up for a rehash of, as long as it was done differently. I mean, Twilight Princess rehashed some stuff, made it feel really different with the transformation. And the time system, I mean, come on, I think there's a lot of us that kind of wanted to make a comeback, though again, not in exactly the same way. Other good uses of a gimmick are in the Oracle games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Season. The time traveling, the season changing, both really enhanced the gameplay, stuck out as cool features. Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Minish Cap with the turning small, and Twilight Princess, when Link to the Past, of course, had the Dark World. Now, those are all in the next gimmick tier, I guess, if we're going to rank these best to worst. They just those ones just kind of made already great games a little bit better. That's all good. Now, Skyward Sword, on the other hand, the bird flying didn't really enhance the game. It was kind of fun flying around, but it still felt like it was just there. They didn't do enough with it, It's just, like I said, bland, just there. In Wind Waker, I felt like the sailing gimmick almost took away from the game a little bit, nowhere near ruined it. And that might be a reason why Wind Waker and Skyward Sword are my least favorite of the 3D Zelda games. I mean, they have a lot of great things about it, but, when you're ranking my favorite Zelda games and it's all very tough competition, that could very well be the deciding factor. Now, the DS games worked them in different ways. They were good. The modern technology one wasn't the greatest, but I like the train a lot better. See what I did there? Okay, back to the topic. Bottom line, when this new game is being reviewed, when people are making their pros and cons lists, this gimmick should be something that is in the pros list, instead of something that's just there, something that's just meh. Okay, now up to the number one choice on my list. And I could probably make a whole video on just this number one thing. This is probably not the most likely of the list to happen, but it is the clear number one thing that I would do if I was creating the next Zelda game. And the number one thing that I would do is give players a choice between motion and non-motion controls. I don't think I've ever seen as much as a love it or hate it game as Skyward Sword. A game that probably set the record for most perfect scores is also the game in the series that gets the most hate. It blows my mind, but there's an obvious reason for this. The advanced motion controls. Now, there are people like me that love the controls and don't think the game's quite a 10 out of 10. There are people that aren't too fond of the controls but can look past them and enjoy the game. But a lot of it is love, hate, love, hate. And it's not just people that simply don't like motion controls. I remember reading someone's comment talking about their friend who was a huge Zelda fan but had a physical disability that made it very difficult to play motion-oriented games. So even though I like Skyward Sword's motion controls, I am not going to be one of those people that's going to be all suck it up and haters going to hate. I mean, you already know my whole story, but I'm not going to talk about that here. Go back to part 0 of the Skyward Sword LP. Now, some games it's a different story. I will be like that. Don't hate on it. But not this. This creates a predicament going into the next Zelda game. Aonuma seems oblivious to the hate, and has stated that future Zelda titles will stick to Skyward Sword controls. Now the thing is, I get what he means when he says, we cannot go back to the traditional controls, not now after what we've done. I mean, all of those perfect scores pretty much said that you would never want to go back, and a lot of people don't ever want to go back, and a new Zelda game with traditional controls would probably be criticized as a step backward. But here's a way to make the control system a step forward. Options, change, control settings, motion controls, on or off. That's it. Just give players a choice. People who adored Skyward Sword are not going to feel cheated out or let down. People who didn't like motion controls are going to look at this as a godsend and won't be turned away from the series. This will increase reception for the game, increase sales for that matter. If we just use motion controls like in Skyward Sword, no new fans are really going to come, and the fan pool will shrink a bit. The people who didn't really like Skyward Sword, they're not going to buy the new one. Sales down. But with a choice, there are people who skipped Skyward Sword altogether because they didn't like the idea of the controls. They'll come back in. Sales up. And the people who loved it will still love it. Not just for the game, but for the Wii U as well. The Wii U sales will go up. It sounds so simple, but it's really important. Now, the downside to this argument. I'm about to talk about the downsides to this argument that seems so simple and genius. Skyward Sword was designed for motion control, so you'd have to slash a certain way to hit an enemy, and pretty much everyone who liked the control regarded that as a good thing, a fantastic thing. So if we had a choice, would the motion controls kind of just be there? Would it still be a step backwards if it didn't really matter which way you swung? I've thought this over and over again, and I do have an idea. Just tone it down a little. The button users can wait for an enemy to drop its defense, while the motion users can look for a way through it. And there's no reason that the shield bash technique in Skyward Sword can't have a button attached to it. Even if it's a little step backwards, it's okay. It's so worth it. The bottom line is that this is not showing how great Zelda can be on the Wii. That's done. This is showing how great Zelda can play on the Wii U. And now we have our next problem. If you're using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, you're not using the gamepad. All of those ideas we talked about in number 4, everything changes. And I know I said you should get a choice, and you should, but I'm putting this in the perspective of the current plan that will not only alienate the non-motion group, but also waste the potential of the gamepad. But for those who like using motion controls, would the potential be wasted anyway? Well, not really. And what I mean by that is, with the people who like motion controls and would choose to use the motion controls if there was a choice, would they, be cheated out and they wouldn't get to use the gamepad? I mean, not really. If it were me, I would switch between the two. And, I wouldn't be quite getting everything in one playing. But, that goes back to, that was the Wii. This is the Wii U. So, you kind of have to move on a little bit. You can keep them there because a lot of people like them. But, you know what I mean. Now, Onuma said that the gamepad would be used, which at first confused me, but now I think I get it. Remember all of the multiplayer talk he did? I may be speculating, but the message I seem to be getting is that the gamepad will be used by the second player. And you know what? That would be fine as an option, and it could work really well. There's a lot of possibility, but you still have to make the game just as enjoyable in single player. Not that it's not more fun to play with friends. What I mean is, design it in single player first, and then add on. Don't design it for multiplayer and then subtract like they did with frickin' Epic Mickey 2. But you still have to give us a choice. And that's the multiplayer thing. And the multiplayer thing is just not good enough. It's a nice option. I mean, this is still speculation, but here's my bottom line. My message to Onuma. The Wii was fantastic. You nailed Skyward Sword. There was no way you were going to please everyone. I know you knew that, but you nailed it. But it's time to move on. This is the Wii U, and the gamepad has to be used. The gameplay has to change, even if it means letting go. Now, I know you don't want to let go, but the only way that's going to work is if you do the thing that makes so much sense to do. Give us the best of both worlds. Give us a choice. Watashitachi ni sentakushi o ataru. I hope that was right. Now, that should wrap things up. But I actually have one more kind of thing to add on to this. A nice touch for the people who really don't like any of the kind of gimmicks is to allow play with the Pro Controller too. I mean, why not? Sure, menu control would be a lot more tedious compared to the gamepad, but that's the price to pay. That's the trade-off. But that is kind of pushing it, and I hope that people would be okay with just gamepad option and Wiimote and nunchuck option. Now, I'm dead serious. If you do this, I will be overjoyed. Not even an announcement of a world selection screen could ruin it. Oh, okay, maybe a little. So, yeah, at first when I was thinking of this as my number one entry, I was thinking along the lines of the whole fan base rather than a personal touch. But as soon as the whole gamepad thing came into play, well, then, yeah, I kind of said, it is a little personal. Let me put it to you this way. If they were making another Zelda for the Wii, I would still put this at number one. Give players a choice. The gamepad just makes it a no contest. An absolute must thing that has to be done. The choice is yours, Nintendo. Now, hopefully I can get enough support for this video and make this a real fan demand. And wow, I really could make a whole video on this topic. Remember, this was supposed to be a top 10? But yeah, this was a clear number one. There's this one, all the other ones. Now, everyone, thanks for watching me talk about all this stuff. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What are some of your ideas? What are some other lists you might want to see me do? The comment section is open and welcoming. And this has been LukerBomb12. Goodbye.